right, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us. My name is Joe Massey, and I'm here with my esteemed colleague, Mrs. Beth Baker Owens from Your Castle Real Estate. As we are getting set up here, everybody is logging in. If you could just please put a comment in the chat box that you can see us, you can hear us, you can see Beth, you can see me, you can see the screen that says your own home, it's possible. If I can get one or two people to comment that you can see that, and then as we're having people log in, tell us where you're from, tell us where you're at in the Colorado area or the Denver area. We'd love to know about that because we might touch on some specifics of different areas as we go through here. And let's go ahead and jump into the introductions. Again, my esteemed colleague, Mrs. Beth Baker Owens. Beth, how are you today?
Well, how are you doing, Joe?
I am fantastic. Beth, you've been in real estate for a number of years, and you're an expert in the Denver market, expert in helping people buy their first home, second home, investment property. Tell us just a little bit about yourself and why we're here today.
I started out as a realtor in 1997, working with my husband, Kent. And the reason I went into real estate was because I learned the hard way what happens if you're not represented. So I have a special heart for first-time home buyers. When our landlady called and said, "You got to move," and I said, "Well, I think we need a realtor or a lender or some of those things." And she said, "Oh, no, I'll take care of you." Yeah, she took us. It only took us about 5 years to recover. We were in a good place. It was an okay place to be for 5 years. However, when it came time to choose a different career, I'd been teaching for 13 years. As I was earning my MBA, I thought, this is where I can really help people and make a difference. That's what I've been doing.
I love it. And you and I have done a number of transactions together, and I can say, you know, the way you help first-time home buyers, the way you listen, the way you care about the transaction, the way you care about the client is truly second to none. It is always an honor to get to present with you. It's always an honor to get to work with you. And I'm so grateful for you inviting me to join you today.
Well, I'm so glad that you're here and on board. I appreciate your working with me on this tech so that we can offer things to people in a way that serves them better. One of the things I love about you and your process as a lender is that you have developed a finely tuned team process where everybody knows their parts, and yet you're able to address so many of those really crucial pieces with buyers. If they're ready to rock and roll now, awesome. If they need to do some work, awesome. Whatever place they are in the process, you can assist. I have so appreciated that. Tell us a little bit more about how you got into lending and what your heart is for it.
Yeah. So again, my name is Joe Massey, Castle and Cook Mortgage, and I started in lending in February of 2002. So more than 20 years now, and got into it right out of college. And really enjoyed it. I have a degree in economics and business from the Colorado School of Mines. So a lot of folks don't use their degree. They have a degree in one thing or another, and they're in a completely different field now. I actually get to use my degree every single day. So I really focus on the financing piece, the mortgage piece, helping people understand the financial side of home ownership. But my favorite part of that is the emotional side, seeing the smiles at closing, you know, seeing when somebody buys their first property and they're excited, you know, they've got the U-Haul truck packed and they bring their children to the closing and, you know, they sign everything and they're excited to go move in. That is by far my favorite part of this business. So tell us about our presentation. What are we going to be talking about today?
Well, if you look on the next slide, what we've got are today's topics. And on today's topics, we're going to start with who's here. In other words, who are you and what are your needs? We've already kind of introduced a little bit Joe and me, and you'll get to know us better as we go. So who's here? Then success stories. I have 3 success stories for first-time home buyers who all did it differently. And this may give you an idea of which mode works better for you. Then we'll talk about what it costs to buy and what kind of lifestyle is possible as a homeowner. We'll go through a bit of a timeline. There's always that question, how long should it take from I think I'm going to go buy a house to I'm a homeowner now? And there are different ways depending on which way you go. Then we're going to talk about the market. You need to know the market. The market that your friends bought in 2020 is not the market we have today. The market that your parents and your grandparents bought in decades ago is not the market today. And so you need to know what's really going on.
Yeah.
Then, as you know, we're going to choose the team because
Mhm.
you don't have to do this alone. I did not do it well.
You probably shouldn't do it alone.
I don't recommend it. I don't recommend it. It was painful at any
Yeah.
rate. Choose your team. You've got a team with you, choose a good one. And I've got ideas of what you need to have on your team. And then your home solution. How do you solve this so that you have your home? And that's where we'll wrap it up, hopefully with you having more hope. If at any point you've got questions, just put them in the chat. We'll get to them as we can. And at the end, maybe you haven't had enough one-on-one because your situation's special. Reach out to me, reach out to Joe. We're willing to talk to you one-on-one because it's very personal when you buy a house. And it's
Yeah.
about finances and dreams and hopes. And Joe, you know that as well as I do. So this is where we're going, and I'm looking forward to engaging with you as we go through the process.
Outstanding. So we touched a little bit today on who we are. So Beth, you've got some pretty cool accolades that you've gotten as a certified negotiation expert, certified residential specialist. Give us just 15 seconds. What makes you unique?
I think one of the things that's most important is that you would choose an agent who will work with you as a coach. I'm a professional coach, not somebody who's going to tell you how it is, and not somebody who's going to make you figure it all out yourself, but somebody who's going to coach you and work with you through it. So that's the CPCC. The CRS is a certified residential specialist, and this means I'm with a network of professional realtors all around the country. So if you're moving from somewhere else, or you decide later to move to somewhere else, I can help connect you that way. And then the MCNE is the Master Certified Negotiation Expert. Negotiations are a key part to this process.
It's important.
Yeah, and it's where, as a novice, I blew it, but I have worked for 2.5 decades to improve those skills so that we get what you want and you can reasonably expect. And Joe, there's this green QR code by your name. What's that?
Yeah, so this is a link to our website. If you want additional information about getting pre-approved for a mortgage, if you want additional educational topics, you can scan that QR code. We've got another copy of it later on in the presentation. Exactly what Beth said, scan the QR code, call Beth, call me, send a text, send a carrier pigeon, however you want to get in touch with us. We are always, always happy to chat.
So who's here? Would you please put in the chat what your dreams are for a home? It could be your first home, second home, third home, whatever. What are your dreams? Do you have plans that are actually in place right now? And could be you might have some frustrations. What are some of those? The goal is to take a look at where you want to go, how you want to get there, and where you've gotten stuck or you've been frustrated so that the process can be streamlined for you. So if you could take a moment and put that in, that makes a difference. Joe, what do you find is most important for home buyers, especially first-time home buyers, with this idea of dreams and plans and frustrations?
Number one thing I see about dreams is people want to achieve the American dream. They want to own their own home. Many, many people are tired of renting. Many, many people are tired of living with roommates. Many, many people are tired of living with their parents, and they want to get that first property and start building equity, start building real estate wealth. And it comes with two parts. Number one is the emotion. Man, I'm really cramped in my space and I want more space, right? I really want a place for myself and my dog, myself and my spouse and my dog, myself and my spouse and my dog and my kids, right? So it's an emotional journey, but it's also a financial journey. And a lot of people look at home ownership as a way to build wealth, as a way to build equity. And it absolutely is. It can be one of the best ways to build wealth that's known in the United States. But the plans are often the complicated part. Hey, I really want to own a home. I really want a yard for my dog. I really want to build real estate wealth, but I don't know how. And that's what we're going to talk about today. And that part, that plans trickles over to the frustrations. I don't know where to start. And I hear this a lot. And it just breaks my heart sometimes that folks are like, Joe, I really want to buy a house. I don't even know what to do. Hey, no problem. Guess what? I know what to do and Beth knows what to do. So if you don't know what to do, you're in the right spot, because we're going to teach you, we're going to show you, and we're going to make sure you know how to get in touch with us so we can show you exactly that plan and help you get over those frustrations.
Absolutely. When my husband and I were just getting started, we thought we'd talk to a realtor. And he said, well, you're not ready yet. Call me when you're ready. But he didn't tell us what ready was. And that
So disheartening. So disheartening.
so unnecessary. But let's look at some success stories, because these are three different groups of first-time home buyers who made it happen in different ways. The traditional way of going and putting 20% down, or as my grandparents had to do, 50% down. Incredible. The loan structures have all changed over time. But let's look at these three groups. The first is with a lot of leverage. The first step is frugality. What does that mean? That means save and budget and plan and really be careful. Saving your money, kind of like a good squirrel, if you will. And you can get extra leverage if you work with family or you work with friends. Next door, we've got a couple of people in their 20s, their mid-20s, living with their folks, saving money so that they can have money for their down payment. The folks I'm going to focus on right now are Tony and Leela and their family. Tony and Leela had a dream to buy a house. I met them before they even had kids, and then they had a kid. And then life happened. And then they had another kid, and they're still living with her parents. And they want to buy a house. And it just has been so frustrating for them. We worked together for 4 years before they were able to put pieces together. And in that time, his mom and dad started having problems and needed a lot of help. And so they found a solution that was creative and worked for all of them. So we'll get into their story a little bit later. Lots of leverage. The second example is William. William decided not to go to college. It did not make sense for him to do that. So he took money that had been saved and saved it. He lived very frugally with his parents again. And then when we started looking at houses, he's going, I don't like this stuff. I don't like this handyman stuff where they don't even know how to lay tile properly. It was really frustrating him. He said, I want it done right. So we looked at some new builds and he said, oh, that's what I want. So I'll tell you his story, because it was a different process for him than it was for Tony and Leela. And then the third is a house hack. And this is Jamie. Jamie was really tired of renting. And she wanted to grow professionally and build her wealth. She figured she wasn't ever going to get married, so she better do it on her own. And we looked at things and we figured out how to do a house hack. A house hack is where she bought a condo and she rents out a room. And that has made it so that her costs have been kept really low, and they were cheaper, much cheaper than her renting. So she's doing well with that one. But anyway, we've got 1, 2, and 3 different ways of doing a non-traditional buy that has worked for people. So we'll weave their stories in as we go along. And Joe, tell us a little bit about this piece, how to handle your money.
Yeah. So handling your money can be complicated, but I love this little cartoon. We know how to handle our money. The problem is handling it less often. And that's what a lot of people think about is, hey, I've got a budget and I've got to save. Well, most likely that is true, but I think that's true for anybody, whether you're renting, whether you're buying a home, whether you already own a home, you probably need a budget and you probably need to save in order to achieve that next step, whatever that next step might be. And so that's what we're going to talk a little bit about is, being that squirrel, storing up, your acorns for the winter. So you've got something to help you sustain through the winter, kind of the same thing, putting money away into savings every single month. And when it's time to take some cash out of that savings account to buy that house, think about the squirrel analogy. It's always good to be saving your acorns.
Absolutely. All three of our first-time home buyers did that.
That's right. That's exactly right. So let's talk a little bit about how much cash do you need? You're saving your acorns. You're building up that savings account. How much cash do you need? Here's what a lot of people think. A lot of people think I have to have 20% down. I want to buy a $500,000 home times 20%. I have to have $100,000 down. Holy cow, Beth, I'm never going to be ready to buy a home. You know what? Nothing could be further from the truth. We have plans where clients can put as little as $2,500 down. All right. That is $2,500 from the buyer. And then you can get the seller or a down payment assistance program to pay for your closing costs and pay for most of the down payment. There's some trade-offs. You might have a slightly higher interest rate. You may have a silent second mortgage that has to be paid back at some point. But if you are somebody that can't quite get over the hump and save up $10,000, $20,000, $30,000, that's okay. That doesn't mean you can't buy a home. Just means we have to look at some alternatives with these minimum, $1,000, $2,000, $2,500 down payments. What's typical? Typically, we see the client invests about 6% of the purchase price for fees, down payment, closing cost, appraisal, everything. So if you're buying a $500,000 home and you've got $30,000 saved up, that's exactly what you would need to be right in that average typical down payment. Or you might say, you know what, Beth, Joe, I really want to have the lowest monthly payment. Well, in that case, you probably are going to need that 20% down and maybe another 2% of the purchase price to cover all of your closing costs. So it's important to understand you're going to have some initial costs in order to purchase that property. So earnest money, this is one that a lot of folks are confused about. Beth, tell us real quick, what is earnest money and why is it important?
Earnest money says, I'm earnest, I'm sincere about buying the house. So I'm taking this check and I'm giving you money to hold as we work through the contract. And that way, if I flake out, you can keep that money. Now, the contract has 9 outs for the buyer, so it's pretty hard to lose your earnest money, but it is your collateral for them to hold your opportunity to explore purchasing the property. And that money really does get cashed, and it's put in a separate escrow account for the transaction. So nobody gets to do anything with it while everything is getting taken care of to get to closing. It's your money, but you can lose it if you don't follow the contract and get out at the appropriate time. So it's your earnest money. I really want to buy this house.
Would you say it might be important for me to have a real estate agent representing my best interests in order to protect me from losing my earnest money if I've never done this before?
Well, yes, we did look at that problem ourselves when our landlady got really nasty and we said, oh, we're just done. And she said, great, I get to keep your $2,500. And we're going, oh, I don't know if we can have you keep that.
Yep.
It was used as a shackle for us.
Yeah. Yep. So I think it's important. You want to have representation to make sure you're following the steps properly. And then you're going to get an inspection. So we've gotten under contract. We've put down our earnest money. We're going to get an inspection. What does this mean? What are they inspecting, Beth?
You've heard of caveat emptor?
I have. Buyer beware.
Yeah, yeah. Well, the idea is that the seller knows more about the house than the buyer does. Probably should know more about the house, right? And so you as the buyer get to investigate, to inspect. And I would encourage you not to have Uncle Joe do it, as nice as Joe is, but I wouldn't have him be my home inspector. I would have instead a certified or licensed home inspector with InterNACHI or NACHI. That way, you know the systems are likely to be working. Check the sewer out, check for radon, check whatever the pieces are. Now, how do you know what's important about that property? Talk to your agent, because your agent can help you work through that. That's why there's a range, because you might be fine with just a general inspection. You may have specific additional things to add. This is what you do. It's your due diligence. Is this likely to be okay? If something needs to be done, is it about worth what I can handle?
Yep. And the cost for that earnest money and the cost for the inspection, those are paid pretty much as soon as you go under contract. And all of the other costs are going to be paid at closing. And this goes back to what we had over here, closing costs, things like that. This is the breakdown of those. Tell us just briefly about appraisal and transaction costs. What are we looking at there?
Your appraisal is an evaluation by a professional third party who nobody chooses. It's kind of by lottery. And your appraiser says to the bank, the home is worth this amount of money. If you're buying it at a lower amount or the same amount, the bank says then they're okay, they're willing to lend the money. But if the appraiser says the home's worth less than the contract price is, then the bank's going to say, Mr. Buyer, you got to make up the difference, or the seller has to drop the price, or you got to figure out something.
Yep.
Because we're not comfortable lending the money. It's an independent third party that evaluates it. Transaction fee is usually, in my case, about $315 that's paid for maintaining the files so that Department of Regulatory agencies can access it when they need to. So it's a transaction fee. And those are set on the appraisal. Sometimes for quality control, they pull it again as a double check, and that's why it's like double the cost.
Yep.
And that just happens randomly, unfortunately. Down payment, if you take a look at the left, it's anywhere from 3% up to 20%, and that depends on the loan. That's where you would hone in with Joe what you're looking at. For cash purposes, there are still some closing costs.
Yep.
If you're a first-time home buyer looking at a cash purchase, great, we'll talk about it. There's not a lot, but there are some. So we'll leave that for as need be.
So I want to jump back over to the left, because this is something that you and I spoke about when we were preparing for this. Ownership has expenses. So if I buy a property, I have to pay principal, interest, taxes, insurance, mortgage insurance, probably HOA dues if I buy a condo or townhome, maintenance on the property, utilities for water, trash, electric, gas, internet. I need to put money into my emergency fund, and I need to spend money updating the property. Beth, this is a lot of things. Wouldn't I be better off just continuing to rent and I just make my rent payment?
If it were only so simple. Is your landlord losing money on your rent?
No.
Okay. But these are the landlord's expenses, right?
Yeah.
So how's the landlord getting his expenses covered?
So what you're telling me is my landlord is paying principal, interest, taxes, insurance, mortgage insurance, and HOA dues, but I'm just giving my landlord rent, and that's what he's using to pay that. So are you saying I'm already paying all of these things?
You're already paying all those things. And the other piece is the joy of being a landlord. When rents go up, their mortgage stays down. So they make more of a profit. The other piece on maintenance. I remember as a renter thinking, this is great, I don't have to pay for maintenance. Well, often it didn't get done.
Yeah.
And the other piece is there are markups now for maintenance by property managers. So what it would have cost me to have somebody do it is increased because of the, I'm going to call it convenience fee. So I still am paying for maintenance. And as a renter, I often would be paying for water or trash, my utilities. So the only thing as a renter I didn't pay for was updating. And I know a couple renters who paid to update the places that they were in. The landlords were very thankful.
So if I'm hearing you properly, the rent I'm already paying is covering principal, interest, taxes, insurance, mortgage insurance, HOA dues, and maintenance. I'm paying my utilities because I pay Denver Water, I pay the trash, I get an electric bill from Excel, I get an internet bill from Comcast, and I already put money into my emergency fund.
Yeah.
So the only cost that's being added on a monthly basis is any money that I want to spend updating my home. Is that right?
Pretty much. Yeah. It's all hidden. Now, is it possible that the maintenance is not good where you live? Well, then maybe you're paying less. Yeah.
Could be.
That could be saving you some money, sort of.
Sort of. Yeah. I think this is really important because a lot of people get really worried when they see this list, like, holy cow, homeownership comes with all of these expenses. Guess what? Renting comes with all of these expenses. The only difference is it's just one payment called rent, and that covers all of these other things. Well, fortunately, when you buy a house, you're going to make one payment called a mortgage that's going to cover all of these things. So it's not going to be as different as you might imagine. You're still going to have all of your utilities. That doesn't change. And then the only thing you're going to add is if you want to buy new furniture, or you want to paint the house, or you want to put new window blinds, you're going to have some costs for that. So that's really the only expense that's being added as compared to your rent. Do you agree with that, Beth?
The only expense, except there is the bother that you are responsible for doing it. You can't just
That's
bug.
true.
So
That's true.
if you don't have the skills of knowing how to fix what needs to be fixed, that could be frustrating. It could be a learning expense, and there's time. So it's not necessarily easier until you get the skills down. But once you get the skills down, it's a lot more affordable.
But hey, if I'm married, can I make updating that person's responsibility? It doesn't necessarily have to be mine, right?
I'm going to let you figure that one out.
Yeah, maybe I should unpack that one in therapy. All right, let's look at the next class or the next slide. So loans. Any other good collateral behind your heart of gold and $1 million smile? Well, we all like to think that we're just going to easily and quickly qualify for a loan, but it does take a little bit of work. So there's a few documents that you're going to want to put together. And this is something that we ask for from all of our clients. So when you're ready to apply for a loan, you're going to scan this QR code. It's going to take you to our website and you can fill out the information online. Or of course, you can call me. My direct phone number is 303-809-7769. You can call me directly and we're going to ask you some personal questions. Where do you live? How much money do you make? What do you do for a living? Do you own any other properties? What does your spouse do? Do you have any children? Do you pay any alimony, any child support? Do you receive any alimony, any child support? And we're going to look at your credit report with you, and we're going to start to gather that initial information. Everything looks good based on your verbal information, and then we're going to start asking you for some written information. So number one, we're going to ask for your driver's license or social security card to prove your identity. We're going to ask for 30 days of your most recent paycheck stubs. We're going to ask for your 2 years most recent W-2 statements. We're going to ask for your 2 years most recent tax returns. We're going to ask for your 2 months most recent bank statements, all pages of the statements, please. We're going to ask for your most recent 401k, IRA, and any other retirement accounts. If you're retired or receive any pension, we're going to ask for your awards letters or your 1099s if you receive Social Security, pension, disability. If you don't receive that, don't worry about it. We're going to ask you if you've ever been divorced. We'll need a copy of that divorce decree to see if you pay or receive any alimony or child support. If you've ever had credit troubles in the past, we're going to ask for a copy of that bankruptcy paperwork. We're going to ask the name and contact information for your realtor because it's going to be really important that Beth and I are working closely together to make sure we're following all the steps, protecting your earnest money, and helping you get into the property. We're going to ask for the name and contact of your homeowner's insurance agent. Now, when you're first buying a property, you might not have one. That's okay. We can help you find one. That's going to come under finding your team. And then once you've gone out with Beth and looked at properties, you're going to get under contract. We're going to ask you for a copy of that purchase contract. And then we're going to ask you for a copy of that earnest money check. Now, Beth, let me ask you, is this a long list?
It's a long list, and
It is.
It's a very frustrating process because what you might turn in, for instance, on the bank statements is all but a couple pages because they were blank.
Yep.
You still have to turn in the blank pages.
We're still going to call you and say, hey, this says page 1 of 6, and you sent me page 1 through 4. I really need to have page 5 and 6.
It's
We
very
have
meticulous.
to have all pages, right?
Meticulous. The other thing is keep a copy of everything that you turn in. That way you can say, oh, it's here. You know, we've already got it squared away. I haven't had this problem with Joe, but I have had this problem with other lenders where in your initial application, you turn in papers and then somebody else gets the file and they say, oh, I don't see this in the file. So you have to resubmit information. And if it takes more than a couple months, you have to submit new bank statements or new tax documents. Joe, if I'm self-employed, because as a realtor, I'm self-employed, I don't get W-2s.
That's okay.
What happens?
Certain things on this list are not going to apply. So you don't get W-2 statements. I want you to just ignore that, right? Or you don't have a 401k. I want you to just ignore that. Or you don't receive any Social Security, pension, or disability income. I want you to just ignore that. And we're going to help you sort through that when we go through that initial application over the phone and you tell me that, hey, I'm self-employed. This is how it works. Great. I'm not going to ask you for paycheck stubs and W-2s. I'm going to customize this list for what I need for you individually. we're going to email it to you along with a secure upload link that you click on. You drag your documents in there, and they automatically come over to me in a secure format. So this list is really comprehensive, and I would say 0% of my clients have ever had to gather all of the documents on this list. There's always something unique that, hey, I don't receive W-2s, or I don't have a 401k, or I don't have an IRA. That's okay. We're just going to ask for the information that you do have. And this is how we verify your information to get you approved for the new loan.
Yeah, super important on that one. If somebody has student loans, where do those fall in? Because I've heard some people say that
student loans, that's a really good question. Student loans will actually get from your credit report. We'll see what is the payment. We'll see whether or not it's deferred, and we'll be able to pull that directly from your credit report. So you don't have to worry about gathering your student loan statements, your credit card statements, anything like that. All of that type of information we can get from your credit report. So that's a really good point. So tell us about this lifestyle. You mentioned this earlier, and I think this is a really, really important piece. And we touched on this just briefly. You know, my thing and what I focus on is the numbers and the logical and financial side, but buying a home is emotional, and there's a lot to it. And this, Beth, is where I admire you so much. You really, really understand the emotion around buying a home. I don't have that skill. I just understand the math around buying a home. So we work together really, really well. But talk to us about this. What's important for folks, and what should they think about that maybe they haven't considered?
That's a huge one. A lot of people will say buying a home brings them happiness. And there's the old joke, if money can't buy you true happiness, I guess you'll have to rent it. But those of us who are renting don't usually feel really happy about renting for an extended time.
That's
so
right.
Let's take a look at home ownership. In the upper left-hand corner, you're the boss of your home. If you want to have cats and dogs, you can. If you want to put any color palette on the walls, nobody's going to fault you for your choice of colors or decor, except maybe your spouse. And if you want to put in a garden growing who knows what, you could grow whatever you want to in your garden or not. And if you want chickens, those blasted chickens, then you can go on ahead and get chickens, assuming that it fits within the city code and the HOA. So if you've been feeling cramped in how you want to live, in your lifestyle, how you really want to make the most and bring as much happiness to yourself as possible, renting can kind of cramp your style. So you got to think, lifestyle, what is it? What makes your lifestyle? Am I going to live in the heart of the city? Am I going to live in the mountains? Am I going to live in the burbs? Where do I want to live? And the idea usually is that people will move within about 3 miles from where they are now because they know that area. It's working for them. It's close enough to work and friends and family. But recreation matters. There was a fellow I was working with who was really buff, and I knew he had to be dedicated, but I didn't realize how dedicated he was. He said, I will go to any of these 3 24-hour fitnesses because they have the right kind of pool and equipment, and I run there and back for my workouts. So I need a mile away so that I've got my run. So we had a most unusual search pattern, but it worked. For him, recreation was important. For some other folks, they go skiing a lot, and some others go snowboarding and mountain biking. They need to be close enough to the mountains that it's not 45 minutes to even get to the foothills. Recreation actually matters, especially for Coloradans.
I agree.
Shopping's important. You've got to be able to get to the grocery store or the schools or the parks. Transit and streets are important. For some people, they don't want to be driving all the time. And I can't blame them. It's always exciting to be on the roads. And so sometimes transit makes a difference. But so does noise from streets and busyness. Crime is an issue for many people. It's a concern. I can't address crime. I can tell you where to go to get the information, but I can't tell you about anything that would be a fair housing issue. You will find the information. Don't worry. There are ways of checking those things out. Kids and family make a difference.
Yeah.
When we take a look, think back to Leela and Tony. Remember, they wanted to be in their own place, and they really were thinking chickens would be really cool. Well, she was thinking chickens would be really cool, and he was thinking they'd be really gross.
He was probably thinking eggs would be really cool. There's a difference between chicken and eggs. Eggs are pretty fun. Chickens sound like work.
Well, she thought the chickens were kind of cuddly and cute. And he's thinking, I don't want to deal with chickens and chicken poop.
Yep.
But there was this whole discussion about lifestyle around what would it mean to live with chickens. So we had this conversation and we're going through all this. And then there was what about mom and dad?
Mm-hmm.
They actually really need help now. And it would be really helpful if they could watch the kids a little bit while they're still capable. So
While we're taking care of the chickens.
the chickens went by the wayside.
Oh, okay. We got mom and dad instead of the chickens. That's a pretty good trade-off.
I think it was a decent trade-off, but it was really an important change because then we had to look at layouts and what would be handicap accessible, et cetera. It changed the whole purview of what we were looking at. The lifestyle suddenly changed.
Yeah.
And in Colorado, we have wonderful seasons. Today is a beautiful, sunny, warm day. It's saying, come outside and play. Don't stay inside. Outdoor living is important.
Mm-hmm.
So our outdoor living, our hobbies, all those things create our lifestyle. The Colorado lifestyle is hard to beat.
It
It's
really
hard
is.
to find just about anywhere else in the United States. So think about what's important to you. You want to do Pokemon Go? I know where there's some good gyms. All those kinds of things can be worked into your lifestyle.
Now, let me ask you this. This is part of the emotional piece, which you're so good at, but I know you're also really good at the financial piece. So I'd love you to touch on this. Ownership builds wealth. Tell us a little bit about this.
Well, I'm going to start it off with a joke. It's a good news, bad news. Shall I give you the good news first?
Yeah, give me the good news.
Okay, I'll give you good news first. If you take a look at 2010 at the far left, you'll see that the average homeowner had $181,600 more in net worth than the average renter. Okay, that's fine. The Federal Reserve repeated that study and in 2022 found that the average homeowner had increased their net worth by over $200,000, and all they did was pay the mortgage. That's all they did.
That's pretty good news.
Yeah, wouldn't you like to have that increase? I mean, for just living in your house and paying the mortgage, you get an extra $200,000 in 12 years.
I don't get that in my apartment when I'm renting. My landlord doesn't help me with that.
Well, no, and that's why if you take a look at the renters increase on the bottom, it went from 5,400 to 10,400. And if you and I were to do a little bit of investigating, doesn't that kind of fit some of the stimulus checks that people received? And
seems like from here to here, we received some stimulus checks and some student loan forgiveness. And that's what led to the net worth of a tenant going up by $5,000 in 12 years.
Right. And that's amazing. So it's really clear. You build wealth when the market goes up on your property. So that's the first way that you build wealth. It's increasing home value. You also pay off the loan a little bit every month. And so it's more and more yours. We all know that if we've ever had a loan for a car or anything. And then the third way that helps you build wealth faster is that the funds for your shelter, it's an expense we all have, double as an investment. They're 2 for 1.
Right.
You talked about having a mortgage, right? So in 2010, people got their mortgage. And let's say their average mortgage was $1,500 a month, which isn't off.
It's about right. Yep.
And so $1,500 a month, their homes up in value doubled, and they're still paying $1,500 a month. What are they doing with that extra net worth? Well, they could pull it out, they could use it. And if they were renting, the rent would have gone up to fit where the home value now is. So why would you choose to not benefit three ways?
I don't know. And I think the biggest concern that I hear from folks that sometimes I see folks, and this is a legitimate concern, and actually I just saw this in the chat box. Sometimes it's more expensive for the monthly payment to own a home than to rent a home.
Mhm.
How would you address that, Beth?
I would say, yes, it might be right now.
Mm-hmm.
And when the home values go up, the rents will go up, but this won't.
That's right.
This stays the same. So there will be a point in the near future, I have to figure out what it is, each rent's a little different, where you will actually be coming out ahead. So would you
Yep.
would you be behind a little bit for a while in that initial payment? Yes. And would you still benefit from the other three pieces? Absolutely.
Yep. You're
So,
exactly right. These three over here are going to happen regardless of whether or not you own the property. And
yeah.
the question is it going to happen to you? And if you own the property, it's going to happen to you. If you rent the property, these three things are going to happen to your landlord.
Well, we can help them get rich. It's okay.
That's right. That's the bad news. Is the good news, you could gain $200,000 in equity. The bad news, you could choose to continue to rent and gain $5,000 in net worth, and your landlord gets all of that difference.
Yeah.
So
So
I still think it's a great time to buy properties.
you do need to look at it though. You really do need
Mhm.
to evaluate, where am I? How long is it going to take? Is this something that's worth happening
Yeah,
in my life?
I
And
think you're exactly right.
there are times where it's not the right moment, but almost always it will be in the near future.
Yeah. So let's talk about that.
Okay.
I'm ready to buy a home. What is my process? What do I do?
Well, let's go back to our three people. If you recall, we have one person, William, who went with a new build, and we had the other two who went with a resale. Let's focus on William first.
Okay.
With William, we started out, we got him pre-approved. We started looking at some homes, and he was disgusted, I think is the nicest word. He's OCD, and, and he just couldn't stand the thought of moving into these places. He said, I want to look at new builds. So we signed in. It's a whole different process with the new build. We signed in together at the new home sites, found something that actually would work for him. And it was pretty cool. A condo with an attached 2-car garage, cut his commute to a third of the time. It was just remarkable. And so we got him signed in, and then we had to follow everything became the builder's process.
Mm-hmm.
And the builder was in charge of everything, including timing. From hello, we want to buy the property, here's my earnest money check. Yes, you still turn in an earnest money check.
Mm-hmm.
To here are your keys, aren't you glad you've purchased? It took 14 months.
Whoo.
Originally supposed to take 9. Took 14 months. And so he had to, in the meanwhile, have a place to live with people who were not going to be kicking him out of his rental situation. That was long.
Yeah, that's a long time.
The other piece is that the builder changed things along the way. It was deemed a supply issue,
Mm-hmm.
and a code issue, and some other things. And so he didn't get some of the bells and whistles he wanted.
Yep.
Just they weren't happening. And when he moved in, they hadn't quite finished construction. They still had a few things to do.
Oh, goodness.
It took another month. And so, is it perfect? No. My husband would tell you, there's no perfect house, just like there's no perfect spouse. And that's just the way of it. Even if you get a new build, it's not going to be perfect.
Right. Even if you get a new spouse, he or she still might not be perfect.
Probably not. I think they're human.
I think you're right.
So there you go. So that's the home buying process for new builds. You absolutely, though, have to have your realtor sign in with you on your first visit, or they're not allowed to help you and work with you. Builders are particular that way.
Yep.
So that's the builder side. So that's William. He was our second example. If you take a look at Leela and Tony and Jamie, their process was get pre-approved, start the searching, put bids on properties. In each of their cases, they put bids on at least 2 properties before they got one under contract. It's still kind of dicey that way. We just have limited inventory. But they got under contract, and then we went through all the rest of the steps. Joe or the lender is in charge of the loan pieces, and then title's taking care of title pieces. And then as the buyer, you've got inspections and other things to negotiate, navigate, and take care of. And that process from I want to get started to I'm done can be done in a month. It can be done in 4 months. For our folks in Leela and Tony's case, it was 1 month to get under contract. It was 2 months from when we started to close. And then it was another 4 weeks for their mom and dad to close on their house, and they recast the loan. So they ended up with a much better loan.
Okay.
So they ended up with getting a gift. It's a only child situation, so it works.
Sure.
And that way there's no estate tax or anything like that. And it helps mom and dad out. It helps all 3 generations out.
That's great.
Yeah. So in 4 months, they went from getting on each other's nerves at one of the family's houses to having their own space and much more space and having a much more reasonable rent. It was amazing.
That's great. Now, what about the market? So we touched on earlier, it's a good time to buy, or maybe it's a good time to buy, but I really like what you said is we need to look at our own personal situation. But a lot of people still want to talk about the market. So maybe I've decided it's a good time for me to buy. I'm, having a baby, or, need additional space, or have a dog, whatever it is. I'm ready to buy. My situation says yes. What do I need to know about the market?
Well, there are a couple of things to know about the market. The first one is that as the market goes up, rent increases. We've talked about that. They're hand in glove. On the left side, you've got home prices. That's your dotted line. On the right side, you see rent prices, but you notice they go up in tandem, which is just amazing.
Yeah.
So the idea is that as soon as you can logistically figure out how to get out, it's wise to do it. Taxes are always increasing. Insurance, unfortunately, is increasing. Maintenance is increasing, and it's always passed on to the buyers. Now, question is, when is it not a good time to buy? Let's say you're going to graduate school. Well, you're going to have a decrease in income because you're putting a lot of money and time into school. So that might not be the best time to buy.
Yep.
Or you could be coming to Denver for grad school, right? And unless you've got a home that you're going to sell and you've got enough to put down, it might make more sense to rent your home back where you are coming from. You don't know if you're going to stay in Denver. If you do, then that's fine. You really need to kind of plan to be in the home at least 2 years.
I think you're right.
Otherwise, you have a problem with capital gains.
And so what I'm hearing is the market is important, and I know we're going to talk a little bit more about it, but maybe my own situation and my own timeline is more important than the market. Would you agree with that?
Always.
Okay. That's what I thought.
Yeah. And, you've got inflation. Inflation's always going up. It shows right there. You can see from 1982 to 2023, it goes up in price. You're going, duh. It's kind of like a joke I heard the other day. I tried renting a bouncy house. And, the cost was twice as much as it was last year. That's inflation for you.
I think you're right. I love it. Now, what else should we know about the market? We know that rents are going up. We know that prices are going up. What about the current market for homes?
Well, when I show people this particular graphic, it often causes them to glaze over. They're like, well, just throw all the puzzle pieces out on the floor and tell me to create a picture. How the heck am I supposed to even know what to look at? What does this even mean? And it's kind of like that with the home market. There's lots of pieces. It's like 1,000-piece puzzle, but you just need to focus on the part maybe that works on the edge, right?
Yeah.
You just focus on one part at a time. And that's the one that you need to make sense of. So, for instance, let's say you just want a small house. You're enamored of tiny, tiny houses. So at the top, you've got homes less than 1,019 square feet. There were 310 of those available when this data was pulled at the end of fourth quarter last year. That's not very many in the whole metro area. And last year, 2,704 of them sold. It took about 23 days on the market for them to get under contract and close. That's fast.
That's real fast.
Just like that. Lots of them were cash, obviously, because it's pretty rare to get a loan closed in 23 days. You've done it for me in 21.
I can do it. Yep.
Yeah, you've done it, but it's pretty rare. Months of inventory is how fast are they selling? How fast is it going off the shelves, if you will, if you were thinking of a store idea. So if it's 1.4 months of inventory, that means in a month and 4/10, so almost a month and a half, everything that's active is under contract. Price didn't go up a whole lot, though. It only went up less than 1%, almost 1%, when you compare 2022's year with 2023's year. That's not much increase in price.
No, not really.
Not a lot. Not a lot. It has to do with the adjustments that we've had with interest rates and the like. And months of inventory this time last year was shorter. It's a smaller number. So homes were selling faster last year. That means with a little more inventory, it takes a little more time for everything to sell. Common sense, nothing.
So if I'm a buyer and there's more inventory now than there was a year ago, based on that metric, it might be a better time for me to buy because I have more choices. Is that correct?
You'll have more choices, and you will have fewer people knocking you around trying to get to the front of the line. The interesting piece that's happened, though, in the market is that buyers have gotten pickier. And it's something to do with, if I'm paying this much more for a property because the interest rates are higher, I really want something that's a little bit nicer.
Yep, I agree.
Logical thinking. And so what we're finding is that while the sellers would like to take as much as they can, the buyers are pulling back, and so we've got a tug of war going on right now between buyers and sellers, and we've got seasonality that's going to come in. But we just take a look. Know if things are staying on the market, you've got a 10-month supply of homes on the market, the seller's going to have a heck of a hard time selling, and they have to outbeat every other property.
That's right.
In that neighborhood. If you've got a neighborhood where you put the home on the market and people come in for cash and they close within 2 weeks, a person with a loan is going to have a really hard time buying there.
That's right.
And so that's where it really is particular. We know that for buyers, it's usually advantageous to buy before everybody jumps in the pool. Or when people are getting out because they're going to go to the holidays. But I've been able to help people all year get into homes and have a competitive edge in their bidding, because it's not always about price on the negotiations, but we'll talk about that later. It's really a matter of know the section that you're looking at, know what's going on in that specific neighborhood.
Right.
Because that part is local.
I think you're right. Speaking of specifics, what about condos? Anything different we should know about condos, or does the market operate roughly the same?
It's really a lot the same. What's different is sometimes the loans that you're able to use, because there's some homeowners associations that are not allowed to go with an FHA loan or a VA loan. The requirements haven't been fulfilled. And so sometimes it limits what you can do. But you just take a look and see. It's again, specific to what kind of loan can you get, where would you like to live, what's available.
Yep. So now let me ask you this. I'm a first-time buyer. I feel really good about my situation. I've saved up my down payment. I feel good that it's a good time for me to buy a home. I like the market. I know the market. I'm excited to go out and buy a home. What do I do to build my team?
Well, I would say that the most important partner to start with is going to be your realtor. Write down a list of questions, interview people. You want to find a person who's a good match, somebody with whom you can communicate, somebody who is really going to be willing to listen to you. Kind of reminds me of a time I was talking to somebody and I asked him, I said, I'm worried. Social media seems to be making communications a lot less meaningful. What are you finding? And they just went,
yeah.
They're going, what's that mean? They're like. They're going, oh, this is not a good conversation. We are not getting anywhere on this.
Yep.
So you need to find somebody with whom you're comfortable sharing your questions, your worries. Some of those pieces are so important. And then you're going to put with that person a lender. And they have to work as a team with you. The three of you together really are kind of like this stacked set of bowls. You have to work together to get things done. A lender can squirrel a transaction. A buyer can squirrel a transaction. A realtor can squirrel a transaction. And my job is to be kind of like the calm in the center of the hurricane because there's so much going on.
And you're very good at that.
Well, thank you. It's or a hub of a wheel. And so that's really what my role is. You want to find somebody who'll do that with you and who can help lead you to the inspector, the surveyor, a lawyer, insurance agent, tradespeople. You've got all kinds of other folks who are likely to be brought in to help you out. Remember, caveat emptor. It's buyer beware. There are things you got to figure out. Is this property really a good fit? And so, yeah, you want a good team. That's what we didn't do. Yeah. And so I would really suggest that you don't follow my lead on that one. Choose a good team. And
I think you're spot on.
Yeah. Makes a difference, Joe.
It does. It really does. So what about this? If I've picked out a team, I'm probably going to have some questions, right?
Well, not only will you have questions, everybody else is going to have questions. I love this little kid. When you ask your parents a question and it turns into a lecture.
Yep.
Expect some questions and suggestions. Well-meaning friends and family they're gonna butt in and they're gonna be helpful. My goal is to be a coach. So that's a different kind of role. I sometimes liken it to when I was pregnant. I have 3 kids. And when you get so that you're showing, and when you get close to full term, I mean, you're like out here. So there's no hiding it. It's very, very obvious to God and everybody you are pregnant. People would come up and put their hand on my belly and say, oh, Beth, I have to tell you about this thing that happened to my whatever. And I would get the most horrific stories about premature births and miscarriages and all kinds of problems. And I would just kind of go, oh, okay. And I learned you smile and you say, thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
I so appreciate it. And then you write it down and you talk to your resource, your OB or midwife, or in this case, your realtor. Because are your parents buying with you?
Not likely.
But if they are, yeah, they're part of the equation, right? And if they aren't, then they don't have to be part of the equation.
That's right.
You get to communicate that. You got to figure it out for yourself and then communicate it with your realtor, because everybody says it's a big deal to buy a house. They want to help you.
They're excited. Everybody's well-meaning. I love what you put here. There's going to be a lot of well-meaning family and friends, but sometimes just because they're well-meaning doesn't mean they're correct.
Oh, so many times oh, yeah, not helpful, not
Yeah.
helpful. But
Now,
you figured out.
what about our SWOT analysis? I'm thinking about buying a home. Is it right for me? What steps do I think through? I really like this slide.
Not everybody is analytical, and some of you may have seen SWOT analysis before. If you've seen SWOT analysis, you start with what fits your budget and your lifestyle, and that's sort of what you're going to go look at. And so for each home, what are the strengths? What are the pros? What are the pluses in this home? And what are the strengths if I live here? What are the weaknesses?
Hmm.
Is the home noisy? Is the drainage around the house maybe not so good? Are the windows leaky? Do I not like the chartreuse in the bathroom? I don't know. What are the weaknesses of the property? And then what are the opportunities? Because maybe you've got a really good skill. You're a good painter. So you can take those purple polka dots and get rid of those without a problem. And your realtor knows where to get discounted but good quality new flooring. So you can take that cat pee carpet out and have a floor that's exactly what you want at a reasonable price. Then you can get the home at a lower price and bring it up to value with a little bit of effort. And then there are threats. Is this near a construction site? Is this near a highway? Is this in an area that's likely to be condemned by the state of Colorado because they're going to expand a highway, right?
Yeah.
Those kinds of things. Think about where old Stapleton was. And you
Mhm.
had all those homes that had the noise pollution around that area, and they were an issue. So think about it. If you love Denver Square and really old Victorian homes, they have so much character. And there are a couple threats. Things like lead in the pipes
Yeah.
and sewer lines and plumbing, and is it knob and tube for your electrical? Was there even any insulation?
Yeah.
So many things. Now, that doesn't take away the charm. It just means you need to know that there may be some extra pieces that go with it. So do SWOT for each
Yep.
of your properties, and then you can figure it out. Now, if you don't like SWOT, what's important to you? Make a list, and each home that you go in, check off what it has.
That's
And
right.
and then save us a spot at the end for, oh my gosh, it's got killer views like behind me, or oh my gosh, it's got barking dogs on the other side of
Mhm.
a fence, and my dog is never going to survive those mean dogs.
Yeah, you don't want that.
So choose a system, set it up. SWOT's one of my favorites because it causes me to think outside the box. I don't just go in and fall in love with the house or go in and go, oh, it stinks.
Mhm.
I can actually evaluate it.
Yep, that's very smart because I think a lot of people make that decision within the first 30 seconds of walking into the home, and they might miss out on a great property, or they might pick a property that's not a great property. You're going to live in this home for conceivably 5, 7, 10, 15 years. Make sure you're going through all the pros and cons of that home to make sure it's a good investment for you emotionally and financially.
Yeah, so it's really put your plan together, make your plan, work your plan, and adjust. One of the
Yeah.
things most buyers find is what they initially thought was going to happen. It's not
Doesn't.
available. It's not in
Yep.
reality right now. And so there's an old adage that all buyers are liars. Well,
Hmm.
no, that's not the case. Buyers just don't know really what they want and what's available.
I think buyers are uncertain, and uncertainty comes from not knowing the next steps. And that's where you're a big resource, Beth.
Well, not knowing the next steps or not knowing what's really there. You're buying
Yeah.
real estate. We talk about dreams, but you're buying real estate. It's a property. And
Yeah.
so you have to be very real about it. And that part, oh well,
So let's talk about that. How do various parties view real estate?
Oh, I love this one. The seller thinks that their home is a nice sprawling ranch with beautiful mature landscaping and mountain views. And the buyer goes in and says, well, it's a little tight. Don't really see any good mountain views unless you count those peak views.
Mm-hmm.
And, the landscaping's okay, but this is not a grand home. That's the buyer's view. And the lender's going, oh, that shack. Okay, what else is wrong with it? Because the lender's underwriter is trying to figure out why this loan should not be made. Not Joe, but the underwriter who's the last gatekeeper for the loan is trying to figure out why they should not give you the property. And so they're going to look at it even more askance.
Mm-hmm.
And then the appraiser is going to come in and say, oh, you might as well be camping. You're just out in the woods on this one. You're going, hey, it's not that bad.
No.
And then your tax assessor, when you get your tax bill, is going to say, well, you've got this palatial mansion and it's worth so much more money. Anyway, they're all different views.
Yep.
And it's the same house. It really is just the same house.
Just different perspective, and everybody's perspective is their reality.
Oh, it is. So when you're negotiating, as a buyer, you see the house this way, and the seller sees the house the other way. You have to figure out how to communicate why, as a buyer, you might think it shouldn't be worth as much.
Yep.
The seller has to figure out how to let the buyer feel the worth that they feel the house has.
Mm-hmm.
That's really the first round of negotiations. And then the next one is through the appraiser. Yep. But you don't get to talk to the appraiser, and I don't get to talk to the appraiser. We sort of get to communicate in writing.
Yep.
Yeah, it's an amazing process. So, it's a matter of saying, let's be as real as we can about the property.
Mm-hmm. So, how do I choose my strategy? What is the best route for me to take?
Here's where I usually start with people. I say, what's your timing? You're living somewhere now.
Mm-hmm.
You have a lease that has a deadline. If you don't renew, what happens to your rent? Because in some cases I saw it doubled, which I thought was just horrendous. You're going to double my rent because I don't renew 3 months in advance?
Yeah.
What the heck?
It can happen.
Yeah, I've seen it happen. It's a challenge, but we've worked with it. So what's the timing? Maybe there's timing that's based on your personal job situation, kids at school. You want to get another season of skiing in. I don't know. Whatever it is, think about your timing. And then who else is on your team? I understand the realtor, you, the realtor, the lender, but who else? Because sometimes, especially for your first home, there's a trusted advisor. It could be a dear friend. It could be your folks. It could be your grandparents. It could be somebody who's giving you down payment assistance in the family bank.
Yep.
Gift. Who is it? Identify it and make sure that you figured out how you're going to work with those folks and they all know about each other.
Could be your spouse, right? Maybe you have different goals for your home than your spouse does. Maybe you want to live in a different area. Maybe you want a different backyard. Have open conversations with your spouse or your partner about what you're buying and why you're buying it and what he or she wants, right?
Oh, yes. When Kent and I bought our second home, we'd only been married at that point 15 years, and we'd known each other 20 years, and we were realtors, so you would think we'd have pretty good communication about houses. And it's time to move, and so we're got a babysitter for the 3 kids, and we're going in, and I see this house, and it's got an apricot tree in the yard. So psyched because I'm 5 years old again, and I'm up in the tree eating fresh apricots, and the kids are screaming in the house, and I don't have to be with my sisters. It's lovely. So all of a sudden I hear, Beth. I'm like, what? I was talking to you. I'm like, you were? Like, yes. Do you see this tree? I said, oh yeah, I see this tree. It's so cool. We can't buy this home. It has a stone fruit tree. I said, no, that's an apricot tree. It's like, that's what I said. A stone fruit tree. Nobody in my family is going, especially me, to live in a house with a stone fruit tree. It took me a while. I'm going, what's wrong with a stone fruit tree?
Yeah.
They're lovely. They bloom in the spring and you have fruit in the summer. And they're beautiful in the fall. I don't know what there isn't to like. He said, you didn't grow up on 2 acres picking up stone fruit.
Hmm.
Oh, we never thought about that. But what
Yeah.
you talk about stone fruit?
Yeah.
So you will, in your learning, learn a lot about your partner you never knew.
That's right. That's exactly right. So make sure you remember they're on your team too. Talk to them.
Oh, has to be. And then there's some things that could hold you up. If you think there might be a job change coming up, or a promotion, or a relocation, maybe that needs to be paid attention to, or you're delivering a baby at a certain time. That's not always
That's
the
a
best.
big one.
Yeah. What can push you faster? Getting in before the baby's born, maybe, or getting in so that your child can start kindergarten at the right time, whatever
Mhm.
that can happen. And what happens if you buy this year? Because usually when people work with me, we get it done.
I have one question.
Mm,
What happens if I don't buy this year?
it wasn't time.
That's right. And so you just want to look at both of these openly and honestly. What
Yeah.
happens to your life and your lifestyle if you buy this year? What happens to your life and your lifestyle if you don't buy this year?
Yeah.
Neither Beth nor I ever tell someone, today's the day you have to buy a property. We like to give you all of the information, all of the options, and then you make the choice. But you really want to think through, what happens if I buy? What happens if I don't buy?
Mm-hmm.
It's
Yeah,
important.
both of them. It's a personal decision. It's kind of like with renting, right?
Yep.
There are times when it makes sense to rent, and there are times it makes sense to buy.
Yep.
If you look at today, tomorrow, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, what is likely to set you up for success?
Yep.
That's what we're here for. It's for you to have your success the way you want it.
That's right. And now it's time for me to select my realtor. How
Yep.
do I do that?
Give me
Pretty simple, right? I just call you.
give me a call, and whomever you're going to work with, put together a game plan, kind of a timeline, go through the what ifs, go through your plan and your budget, and start saving. Big journeys only happen over time. You've got to clearly have an intention of what you're doing. You've got to be focused, and then you can make it happen. But do start with somebody by your side. Yep. Who's able to professionally give you guidance and answers to questions, because it's a lot of money. It's a lot of emotion.
It is.
That's a lot of time. So let's make sure that whatever happens is what you need to have happen in the time frame that you need it.
Okay? You're exactly right. You're exactly right. And that brings us to our last slide, Beth. How do we get in touch with you if we want to learn more?
It's all here. 303-550-2941 is my phone. It works for text. I've got a website with looking at houses all around the metro area, bethbakerowens.com. You can check me out on Instagram and get a better feel for kind of the things that I like. There'll be a little bit of real estate, but not a lot. And as I was talking with my daughter and my son, they said, well, Mom, not everybody gets their questions answered on a webinar. And I said, well, of course not. I said, well, will you please tell them that you'd be okay to get together with them for a cup of coffee? I said, yeah, coffee or tea, that sounds great. That way, if you've got questions, we can go over them personally, privately, and get some answers to questions. If I don't know the answer, we'll figure it out together. Yeah. And same with Joe. If you've got questions of the financial variety, give him a call and say, hey, am I in a situation now where I could buy? Something happened earlier. This is where I am. I was told no. Can I now? And Joe will be able to tell you.
That's right. That's right. I love talking about this stuff. Just like Beth, I know you love talking about this stuff. I wake up in the middle of the night thinking about real estate, thinking about loans. So you are never hassling either one of us. You are never inconveniencing us. Give us a phone call. If we're available, guess what we're going to do? Answer and chit chat with you. If we're not available, guess what we're going to do? call you back. Leave a message. We'll call you. We love talking about this stuff. Send a text, send an email, follow us on Instagram, either one of us, and let us know how we can help you. Beth, thank you so much for this. I really enjoyed it. Everybody out there, I hope you learned some information about buying your first property. I hope you feel a little more confident, a little more empowered, and a little more excited about going out and purchasing your first property. Beth, any final thoughts?
Yeah, let's make your dreams come true. Thanks.
We'll see you guys again soon.